and I believe it's my favorite Uwe Rosenberg? Hello friends, I'm Brian, and this is Gizmo Board Games. Today I am bringing the first part of my top 50 favorite games of all time countdown. A countdown that's now on its third year to represent or celebrate my 3 years of a channel, culminating with my final 10 on February 28th, the 3-year anniversary of me starting this channel. So I've done this, like I said, 3 times, and I'm going to go through my top 50 games in 3 sessions, basically 50 to 31 today, 30 to 11 next week, and then again on February 28th, my top 10 favorite games of all time, the 2025 edition. So the way I've done every top 50 favorite game of all time list is I take all the games I've played ever, all 400 and whatever of them there are now, and put them into Pub Meeple. If you're unfamiliar with Pub Meeple, basically it's just something you can put a bunch of different types of things in and rank them by virtue of it putting 2 matchups on the board, and you just pick which one is your favorite of those 2 matchups to move on. And then it does some behind the scenes stuff and puts them in ranking or based on your selection of favorites. So that's how I've done it every time, and that hasn't changed. What that does do is create some interesting movement on my top 50 favorite games lists. It does favor kind of the cult of the new versus, cult of I haven't touched in a while. But I like that better than taking my top 50 games and then looking at, my next 50 and figuring things out on my own with all the new games and stuff. I figured, I'll just do it this way, get my how do I feel about this game right now, which would I rather play if they're both put in front of me, and I had the ideal group to play that game, and then picking that game. So that's how I've done it. That's Pub Meeple. And that's probably enough rambling about the background of all of this. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my number 50. My number 50 favorite game was number 26 last year, so it dropped quite a bit, but it's still hanging on to the list at 50, and it is such a good cooperative pick up and deliver game. A little bit of a horror theme, but nothing super scary, and it's family weight. It's Horrified. And in Horrified, all you're doing is you're trying to defeat the classic monsters: Dracula, Wolfman, the Invisible Man, Frankenstein, and his wife. And to do that, you need to collect various items around the town and do certain things with them depending on the monster. And this one's got variable difficulty settings. You can play it easy, that way you're going against 2 monsters, I think. The normal is to play against 3 different monsters, and then you can play it on hard with 4 monsters in play. In the meantime, there are also villagers that can come out into action, and they can also get killed, and you need to defeat all the monsters before you run out of time, or before you get killed, or villagers get killed too many times. It's just a fun game that I've really enjoyed, and it's kind of clinging to my list right now at number 50. My number 49 was number 40 last year, so it's fallen just a little bit, and that's because I haven't played it in a while, and I've only ever played it solo, but I've got a great solo version in the big box collection of Everdell that I just got, last year, the year before. I really do enjoy Everdell. It's a game where you've got worker placement and tableau building and managing of resources to build that tableau of creatures and their little huts they're going in. You can take actions on other people's village if they've got, location spaces you can go to. And it's really about managing your workers and resources and tableau, because your tableau can only get so big. After that, you can't play any new cards to it. And some cards, when you have them down on the board, you can play other cards to your tableau for free instead of paying the cost. So you're really just managing a lot of things in Everdell. It's got the cute animal creatures. It's got a lot of new expansions that have come out recently that I'm not really super interested in. I don't play 2-player games, so I'm not super interested in the duo. Far Shore, I think is what it's called. It's probably fine. I've heard added some great, new tweaks, but I don't need them. I've got the big box of all that stuff I haven't gone through yet, so I'm not really concerned about diving into yet a different way to play the same game. And then they've got the family version, or My Little Everdell, I think. My kids have just kind of outgrown that one. Otherwise, I would be interested in that one for sure. But they've outgrown that one. They can play the real one if they want to. So that's Everdell. That's my number 49. My number 48 was number 44 last year, so it's dropped a few spots. Dinosaur Island. I've really enjoyed this game. Haven't got to the table in years. It used to be in my top 10, maybe even my top 5, because I really do enjoy it. The theme is Jurassic Park in a box. It's got worker placement again. It's got some little bit of tableau building and a little bit of tile placement in your board as you're building paddocks. And those paddocks are going to hold dinosaurs, and you got to draft dice with your workers before your opponents do to get the DNA you need. And you've only got so much cold storage to hold DNA, so you need to kind of increase that if you're trying to build bigger dinosaurs. So it's just a lot of managing of different things at different times. But mostly it's about getting those dinosaurs into your park, attracting guests, and then, hopefully you got the security so those dinosaurs aren't eating your guests and costing you points. So it's really a lot to manage. It does take a little bit to play and teach, but I think it's really worth it, especially if you like dinosaurs or Jurassic Park, because it really is Jurassic Park in a box. I really enjoy Dinosaur Island. I just haven't gotten it to the table in quite a while. My number 47 has fallen, almost the biggest faller on my list, but not quite. I think the biggest faller actually fell off, and then I've got one that fell a bit further than this one, coming up a little while on the list. But my number 47 was number 13 last year, so it has fallen 34 spots, and that again is because of lack of play, and because for cooperative games, I've got a bunch of games that I've enjoyed quite a bit over the years. And this one is just falling off a little bit. It's Hanabi. I don't think I've mentioned that yet. And Hanabi is a card game, so you can take it anywhere. I have taken it anywhere lots of times. I played it a lot, and that's probably part of why I haven't played it much recently, because it is a game you can kind of beat after some time with the same group, because it's a game where you're not looking at your own cards, you're given clues, and there's a limited number of clues you can give in the course of the game. You can earn the clues back by doing certain things, taking right actions, but mostly you're managing the 8 clues you've got to give to all your teammates, and you can only give them one specific type of clue each turn, and you really need to interpret what those clues mean to determine what's in your hand and when to play or not play certain cards, or even discard them away and get a new card in your hand. And the point of the game is you've got 4 different colors of cards, or maybe it's 5, that you're building up stacks of from 1 to 5, and each of those numbers appears 3, 2, or 1 in the case of the number 5 times in the deck. So you really just got to manage the placement and playing of those card actions and clues, and it's just a very stressful but fun game that you can carry around with you anywhere. I really enjoy Hanabi, just haven't played it in a while. Need to start teaching it to some of my friends here now so I can get it back out and play it some more. My number 46 is the first of 3 or 4 different Garfield games that are going to appear on this list. It is my favorite of the South Tigers series, so you won't see the other 2 on this year's list. But maybe once I play them more, they'll take place of Wayfarers of the South Tigers, my number 46 favorite game as of right now. Wayfarers of the South Tigers, I really enjoy it. It's a game where you're managing your dice actions. You've got 2 or 3 dice that you're using each round, and you're placing them on certain action spots. And you've got some workers that you can place out, but those workers are going to be played to the main board area, and they can disappear, or they could sit there the rest of the game, because the only way they come back is if somebody buys the card that they're sitting on and adds it to their tableau, and then that player gets the worker. So your worker might not even come back to you ever. But it's a game where you're just managing up a tableau either of land and or sea actions, and those are going to give you more abilities, more worker placement spots, more reset actions, and the whole game is just trying to earn all the points you can by building up your tableau and then moving up kind of the timing track. As you move to the end, you need to make sure you have meet certain requirements to advance on that track, and if you're the first one to go a certain space on that track, you get the thing that's on that spot to boost your ability as well. So it's a bit of a race game, a bit of a tableau building game, a lot of managing your dice and workers. I really do enjoy Wayfarers of the South Tigris, a great game from Garfield Games. My number 45 is new to the list. It might have just missed last year, I think, and I hadn't played it before then. And it's my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game of all time, I believe. I haven't played that many, so before you snipe me in the comments about that, I haven't played many Uwe games. I'm not going to lie. So this is one of the few I have played, and I really enjoy New York Zoo. It's such a simple, fun family game where you're going around using the same elephant on the main board. Everybody's taking turns moving that elephant and taking the action at that spot, whether getting more animals to add to your pens in your zoo, or more importantly, getting new pens in your zoo in which to place animals. But even more important than that is the whole game is trying to fill out your zoo board, because the first person to completely fill out all the open spots in the board wins. But in order to do that, you need to not only get zoo pins on your board, and you have to have animals available to place in those pins. You also need to take advantage of getting your pins filled up, because when you fill a pin, all your animals are going to go away save one, and that'll allow you to draft different attraction board pieces to your board. And they start off, you can get a big roller coaster all the way down to just one tiny little food stall to fill in little square corners. But if you're the first one to get to the bigger things, you can take advantage of, that 4x2 stall to take up a bunch more space on your board than a single square does. And that's what I really like about the game. It's so simple but complex in its nature, easy to teach. It doesn't take too long to play. I really enjoy New York Zoo, and so that's why it's my number 45. My number 44 was number 31 last year, so it's fallen a few spots, 13 to be exact. It is a bag builder that, again, I just haven't played in a while because it's kind of complex to play the first time. After that, it's not too bad. Quacks of Quedlinburg does have a bit of a learning curve because there are 5 or 6 different colors of pieces you can put into your bag. Those are ingredients in a potion that you're building every round. And on your turn, you got to know what that does when you place it into your potion. Each color does a different thing. Each number gives you ability to skip, spots when you place your next one. And so you got to kind of learn what yellow does versus blue versus red from game to game. And if you got the big box like I do, you can add, 6 different variables for each of those even. So it's a bit of a learning curve, but it's not super complex. It's just a bag builder where you're taking turns, drawing things out of your bag, trying to not bust. Got a little bit of push your luck element because there are some negative effects in that bag as well. And if you get too many of those, you kind of bust and you get limited actions during the later phases, because the later phases are going to let you buy new tokens to put in your bag, depending on how many, how far you got into your potion, and score points. So you're just managing your bag, you're building, and you're pushing your luck aspect. I enjoy it. It's not super complex after the first play, but there is a bit of a learning curve on Quacks of Quedlinburg. I would love to get this one back to the table. Just been a while, so maybe I'll look forward to doing that with my game group here before long. My number 43 favorite game is a game that hasn't moved from last year. Still number 43. I was 43 last year, and that is Santa Maria. And this is a game where you're drafting dice from a common pool. I think you get 2 of each color each round, maybe I'm off. But you're using those dice to take action on your player board. And you're going to use those actions to acquire resources and money and things you need to move up common scoring tracks, in-game scoring objectives, or more importantly, to buy more tiles to put on your board, because the die you draft is going to go either down the row or down the column or across the row of its value. So if I draft a 3 die, it's either going to be a white or a blue 3, which means I either go down a column or across the 3 column. And whatever is in my board in that row or column, that's what I'm going to trigger. So the more tiles I can buy to add to my board, the more abilities I'm going to trigger as I draft the dice. And it's just a game where you're trying to balance getting the resources you need, getting the money you need to extend those turn actions, because you can only draft so many dice each round. And I think it plays for 4 or 5 rounds, and then you see who has the best score. So you're just building up your individual board and then triggering all those actions on it with the dice you're drafting from the common pool. I really like Santa Maria. I think it's being re-implemented as Saltfjord now-ish. Just came out or is coming out soon. I've heard a lot of good things about that, how it's basically Santa Maria with a little bit more to do. So I'm looking forward to that. And Santa Maria comes from Aporta Games, which aren't always the easiest to find here in the United States. So if you're interested in Santa Maria, maybe check out Saltfjord. It should be a little bit easier to acquire, and I believe it's about the same game. So that's my number 43, Santa Maria. My number 42 is new to the list. It probably could have made the list last year. It just didn't. Can't tell you why it didn't last year. I can't tell you why it did this year. Other than it's a game I want to get to the table again because I haven't played it in a long time. And I really, really want to play it again. It's Teotihuacan, City of Gods. I just really enjoy this game. It's a dice management game where you're using your dice to move around the board to the various places. And those places you're going to be taking actions to either advance tracks or get resources to turn into abilities and actions and, the usual Euro style stuff that I always enjoy. This is just another one of those dice management games. I've had a few of those on this list, a few more to come, I'm sure, in my top 50. But I just haven't played this game in a while, and I think I just kept clicking on it because I would love to get this tabled again. Teotihuacan, I just look forward to playing it again. Such an enjoyable dice management game. My number 41 favorite game, and this is where I do a little bit of a cheat. I mentioned this last year when this game was on my list. In fact, this was number 5 last year, my biggest faller on this year's list. Again, because I didn't play it or any of its iterations other than the ones we'll mention later. But this is Pandemic. Basically, base Pandemic plus Legacy. I played Pandemic Legacies 1, 2, 0, and the base Pandemic game. And this is going to encompass basically all of those. And I enjoy Pandemic. It's a game that got me into the hobby. And so I love everything Pandemic's brought me. Hours and hours and hours of enjoyment with the Legacy versions. Just a game I haven't played in a while. And a game, if you're thinking about base Pandemic, it's kind of been improved upon. And so I'm not looking at playing it a lot more. I might play Legacy again, especially if they make a new one. I'm definitely in for a new regular Pandemic Legacy. If you're hearing me, Matt Lecoq and team. But as far as the Pandemic itself, I played it out a little bit, and that's why it's fallen so far. Last year I threw it in as a kind of a thought of, man, I really love Pandemic. I loved all my plays of Pandemic Legacy. Everything Pandemic has brought me through the years, and so it was my number 5. And I still appreciate everything it's done, but looking at it now more objectively, there are a lot of other games that I want to play and have played and will play. And so every time Pandemic came up, yes, I love Pandemic. I'll always love Pandemic and appreciate everything it's brought to me. But right now, it's just kind of trailing off the list because there are just so many good and great games that I prefer more. And so I still love Pandemic. I really love all my plays of Legacy. Unfortunately, I can't relive those again the first time. So that's why it's fallen so far. My furthest falling game of this year is the collection of Pandemic and Pandemic Legacies at number 41. And probably I wouldn't be surprised if this drops off the list next year, barring something crazy like a new Pandemic Legacy game or something. So that's my number 41, Pandemic/Legacies. My number 40 favorite new to me game has fallen 20 places from number 20 last year. It is 5 Tribes. the Gins of whatever, I don't remember. Five Tribes, an old classic game. I've played in one of my recent solo challenges. I printed off a solo mode for this game so that way I could keep playing it because it is a bit complex. A lot of analysis paralysis. A little bit to teach people. I've taught it quite a few times. I played it a bunch solo now. I really like Five Tribes. It's a great game where you're just moving meeples around a board and taking actions based on the meeples you end up with and your spot on the board. And the best part of this game is your points are your currency, and you got to bid on turn order from round to round. So it's got that neat little aspect of you've got to give up your points to get better turns, but everybody can see the board and see where the best turns might be. And so it's managing that bidding and the actions. And the downside of this game is after every turn, everybody's got to reevaluate every possible move on the board because it is a living game with the moving of the meeples and the meeples being the action drivers. So that hurts it a little bit. But Five Tribes, I really enjoy it. I'm not sure why exactly it fell 20 places, or maybe why it was even so high last year, depending on how you want to look at it. Still an enjoyable game. I still like getting it to the table, but not as much as some of these other games here as we get into the top 40. With my number 39, a game that's fallen from 24 last year, so 15 spot drop off on a game I like, my family's liked. We just haven't played it as much, even though I've played it a bit this year. It is the Isle of Cats. I've been more versions of this recently. I haven't played any of those yet. The Roll and Write, I think it's Roll and Write. I've heard a lot of good things about for playing it quicker and easier and smaller table space. But I like the Isle of Cats for what it is. And it's got various modes. You can play, the real mode where you're drafting cards into your hand, and then you can purchase or not purchase those cards to take actions with. But you need to make sure you've got at least some crates to send to the island to collect cats in. Otherwise, you're never going to collect cats. And the cats are going to fit into your boat to earn you points as they lay about in your boat that you're using to save them from the island. Some of them count as in-game scoring. Some cards allow you to take treasures onto your boat. It's a lot of fun, a great managing of resources and drafting cards and using cards and fighting for the cats everybody needs on the board. And then the tile Tetris bit of action you've got on your player board trying to earn the points towards your in-game objectives and the common objectives that are out in play. I just really enjoy Isle of Cats. And again, it's got the family modes, so you can play it a super simple version, a relatively simple version, or the full-on actual game version. I really appreciate any game that does that, where I can play it with literally anybody with the minor tweaks to the gameplay. My number 38 was 36 or 32 last year, so it's dropped 6 places, which isn't a far drop considering there are 11 new games on this edition of the list. I didn't mention that earlier. So almost dropping 6 spots when it could have been displaced by 11 games is kind of like it rose a little bit. But it's Rumble Nation, a game not many people know about. I don't know how hard or easy it is to get your hands on here in the USA. It's from Hobby Japan Games. But all it is a bit of an area control game where it plays basically in 2 phases. The first phase is you're taking turns, rolling 3 dice, deciding of those 3 dice, you're going to pair 2 of them up to add their sum value, obviously between 2 and 12 because they're 6-sided dice. And that'll tell you which part of the board landmass you're going to place your warriors in, your samurai, or whatever they are in the game, your cubes. You're going to place cubes into that section of the map, and then the third die will tell you how many cubes are going in there. If it's a 1 or 2, you're placing 1 cube. If it's 3 or 4, you're placing 2 cubes. And if it's 5 or 6, you're placing 3 cubes into that section. Once everybody's done this around the board enough times to run out of cubes, you go to the next part of the game where you're going to face off and try to win control of each of the zones, starting with the zone 2 all the way up numerically through zone 12. So whoever has the most cubes in zone 2 wins that zone. That player gets to place a cube or 2 cubes into every zone adjacent to that one that they already have a cube in, adding to their power in those future zones. They'll do that for zone 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. You're scoring points based on the value of the zone. So whoever wins the zone scores the point value of that zone. So again, if it's zone 2, that player is going to score 2 points. Whoever comes second in that zone is going to score half the value, or 1 point in this case. So zone 12 is worth 12 and 6 points, but zone 12 is also going to have all the reinforcements from all the zones that have been adjacent to it throughout the game. It's just a quick, fun area control game that I really enjoy, and that is Rumble Nation. My number 37 was number 11 last year, so it's fallen quite a bit, and it's the second Garfield game on this list, and it won't be the last one. It is Architects of the West Kingdom. I really enjoy Architects of the West Kingdom. It's a unique worker placement game in that your workers stay put throughout the game unless they get sent to jail by an opponent, or you can recall them yourself even with the same send opponents to jail action. But that's neat because the more workers you have in any given area, the more powerful that specific action becomes. Like the first worker I place in the woods, I get 1 wood. But when I place my second worker there, alongside the first one, I get 2 wood. And then if they're both still there, when I place a third worker, I bring back 3 wood. So I've collected 6 wood in 3 turns, basically. So you've got to manage how powerful your workers are getting and your opponent's workers, because you can go, like I said, to a certain spot and collect workers from one area and basically bring them back to a holding cell, and eventually you can put opponent workers into prison. But this is also a way to recall some of your workers back from a zone you might not want them sitting in. You're also managing different tableau cards because in the end you're trying to build buildings. And your cards are buildings or helpers that'll give you certain powers at, when you take certain actions or towards certain developments. So you're going to want to collect buildings and the resources you need to build those buildings, so that way you can take the action to build those buildings and score points and drive the end game, because the end game is driven by buildings and things being built. Another thing you can do as a build action is build towards the common cathedral. I think it's cathedral. And you're working up, and as you help build the cathedral, you're going to keep working up the cathedral track and getting bonus from doing that action as well. So it's just a lot of fun and a worker placement with more twists and turns than a normal worker placement has, but it's not overly complex. I really enjoy getting this one out, playing it in groups of up to 6, I believe. I'm not even sure if you need the expansions. I've got the big box of everything. I'm not sure if you need all the expansions to play up to 6, but I know in my version I can play with 6 people. I've done it before. A lot of fun. Architects of the West Kingdom. One of my favorite Garfield games, for sure. Number 36 is new to the list. It's new to a lot of things. It is a game that won the Game of the Year this past year. It is SkyTeam. I really enjoy SkyTeam. It's a 2-player cooperative game where you're rolling 4 dice each. You're hiding them behind a board. You're not talking to each other. You're just taking turns placing dice into the plane cockpit to help get ready to land a plane in various locations. There's a bunch in the box, a bunch of different objectives, city objectives that you're trying to land in that do different things. But in the end, you're just taking turns placing dice without talking, other than you're letting your dice placement do the talking. But you got to get the brakes down. You got to get the flaps ready. You got to make sure the plane's level. You got to clear the airspace of all the other planes. And of course, you've got to land on time. You don't want to overshoot or undershoot the runway. It's really thematic for what it is. And I just really enjoy the theme. I'm an airline enthusiast to an extent. So the theme caught my eye. I heard wondrous things about it. I was super excited to check it out. I don't play two-player games very often. I mentioned that a bunch. And this is one I think is probably my favorite two-player game on the list. A cooperative game I like, two-player game. I just enjoy everything about SkyTeam. I want to play it some more as I talk about it, and that's always a good sign. I think it's deserving of Game of the Year. Maybe not the most in-depth Game of the Year, but so much fun is SkyTeam. My number 35 was number 37 last year, so it actually rose 2 spots, and I have no explanation. I haven't played it recently. I haven't played it in a while. It's just one of those games that everybody loves. It stood the test of time. It's been around forever. It's on a lot of lists of favorite games from gamers, from non-gamers, from whatever. It's on every shelf in every store you can buy games at. It's Ticket to Ride. And if you don't know Ticket to Ride, it's a game where you're drafting various cards of trains. And when you play out a certain number of the same color trains, you can put your trains onto places on the board with the tracks that match the color to build out your routes, because you start with 2 or 3 different route cards that you're wanting to build up by the end of the game, and you can get more as the game goes on. But really, it's just a race to try to get all your routes built on your map by collecting cards that you need and then playing them out to get your trains out on the board. You're going to score negative points for every route you don't complete, positive points for every route you do complete, points along the way as you're building up the routes, and, of course, points for the longest contiguous route of connected train tracks on the board. Ticket to Ride, just a joy to play. A very, very welcoming game to get people into the hobby, and nothing bad to say about Ticket to Ride at all, ever. My number 35 favorite game. My number 34 favorite game is new to the list, and the third Garfield game from this section of the list. Shout out to Garfield Games for having some good games. I said this was my favorite Garfield game of all time when I first played it, playtesting the solo mode as it was being developed. And that still probably holds true, but it doesn't hold true. Spoiler alert, it did not finish highest for Garfield games on my top 50. It's second highest, and that's fine. I haven't played it since I got the physical copy. I have played it, like I said, digital. I was helping finalize the solo version of Ezra and Nehemiah. I like this game a whole lot. It's got a lot of things I like about a game, obviously. It's got card mechanisms. You're placing cards on the board and taking actions based on not only that card, but every card that shares something in common with that card. So the more of the same type of card, in this case red, blue, or yellow, it's been a while since I played it, you're going to take that specific action. So I could still play the one blue action card I've got on the board and do the blue action at value 1, or I could place my third red action card on the board and then take advantage of all 3 red cards that are still on the board to do that 3-powered red action. But to do the actions, I got to have certain resources at times, certain capabilities. So I've got to manage a little bit of that to make sure I can do the action that I actually want to do at the power that I could do it at. I don't care about the story. I'm not religious. I'm not religious. I know this one is one of those games that I guess got a little bit of slack because of the theme. I don't know anything about Ezra and Nehemiah, whatever to me. But the game itself is you're going around and you're basically making offerings at the temple. You can work up the track of followers that specifically have Ezra and Nehemiah in it, or maybe it doesn't have those two. I don't remember. It's been a while since I played this one. But you're working up the track. That way you can get various, abilities to score points or, secret help things based on the tile layout there. Or you can help build the wall where everybody's working together to build up the wall. And you got to take actions to collect rubble, and then you turn in rubble and help build the wall. And when you build the wall, you can get certain resources or points or whatever that help you along the way. I'm trying to remember what else. I feel like there's one more thing, but maybe that's all the things. But in the end, I really enjoy Ezra and Nehemiah. It's one I want to get to play again. I just feel like it's got so much crunchy management of actions and resources and things that I just really enjoy about gaming. So, Ezra and Nehemiah, I'm sure it's going to continue to ride up my list once I play it again, because like I said, I haven't really played it since it was in the production phases. But now I've got the physical copy. I can get people over and play. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. Still, debuts at number 34, and I can only imagine as I play it, it's going to go up. But I might be wrong. We'll see. My number 33 game was number 30 last year, and it's been in my top 10. It was a game that I didn't even really want when I got it. I mentioned this story a bunch of times. I don't care about Marvel. I knew nothing about it back in the way back when. But Marvel Legendary, or Legendary, a Marvel deck building game, whatever its official name is, I only picked up when I was at Game Store because I heard good things about it. I liked Dominion, so I liked deck building, and I knew the people I play with like Marvel, and so I got it for them, and I've had it ever since. I've added a few expansions. It's got way too many expansions. I think I got 4 of 20 or so that are available. I don't even know. But you just play as Marvel heroes, and you're trying to rid the city of the threat from whatever big bad boss and his henchmen you have out. And you're taking turns just basically buying more cards into your hand and then using those hero cards to punch bad guys in the face. And various times bad things are going to happen, and you might end up losing the game. You might end up winning the game. It's got that semi co-op, like whoever scores the best wins at the end. I've never really played that way. Like we've kind of looked at like, oh, who would have won, whatever. But I've always basically just played the cooperative version. We're trying to beat up, Loki or Mastermind, or I don't even know. That's as far as I go with who the bad guys are, to be honest with you. I think Thanos is one of them. I just enjoy the Marvel Legendary deck building game, and so that's why it's still hanging out right in the middle of my pack, kind of where it's sat for years. I still play it from time to time. It's been a little bit on this one too, actually. But that's my 33 Marvel or Legendary Marvel deck building game, whatever. My number 32, another cooperative game, and I mentioned the Granddaddy earlier on the list, and this is my favorite spin-off outside of the Legacies, but those come and go. This is the one that I can play the one off of, and that is Pandemic Fall of Rome. I really like the Fall of Rome version. I like the little bit of history that's in it, but I really like the play style. It's different than the other Pandemic games. Instead of spreading out the viruses on the map when they trigger, these cubes are barbarians trickling down from their home location towards Rome, and you just need to keep pushing them back and keep them at bay. Or, better than that, you can play a certain number of cards of their color and make treaties with them. And once you've made treaties with them, now they kind of are on your side. So you can win by eradicating or by converting. And I just like that little twist. That twist and the fact that they march from their home location, those two things have really made Fall of Rome the Pandemic game that I enjoy the most. Out of the ones I've tried. I haven't tried, like I know Iberia is a favorite of a lot of people. I haven't played that one. Can't comment on it. Thematically, I like the Star Wars one, but it's basically just Pandemic different. I think there was another new one that came out recently that I can't recall now that I'm thinking about it, that had another IP. So that one might be enjoyable too. But for me, Fall of Rome is the Pandemic game that I like the most. And finally, rounding out this list, number 31 is a new to the list, an old favorite. I think it's either on or just fell off the Board Game Geek Top 100. I first played it for the first time this past year. It's Lorenzo Il Magnifico, and this is a game where you've got a common shared dice pool, and you're using your 4 workers in conjunction with those dice to buy cards for your tableau that are going to trigger when you do certain things. So you put a little bit of an engine building, a little bit of worker placement based on dice drafting. So I just like everything about it. I like cards. I like building things. I like dice drafting, especially when it's a shared dice pool. So you don't have to worry about dice mitigation at all. Everybody's dealing with the same dice, but maybe you've got something in your tableau that helps mitigate that anyway. And the cool thing about this game is once you place a worker into a column, you can't go back to that column. So I like that little style. There's a bunch of limited spots. You got to have not only the right dice to go get cards you want, but you got to be able to afford the cards you want. So you got to race your opponents out to the card that everybody might be eyeballing because it's the cheap good card, or it's a really expensive card and I've got the money for it and he's got the money for it. Does he want it more than me? I don't know. So a lot to think about in Lorenzo Il Magnifico. Just a great old Euro game. A lot of good stuff going on. And that's my list. That's the first 20 of my 2025 top 50 games of all time. I'll be back with my next set of 20 next week. You can come see that, especially if you subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, you're going to want to do that to check out that list. And then on February 28th, when I get into my top 10 favorite games of all time, a lot of old favorites, a lot of new surprises. Who knows? I don't even remember right now because I haven't looked at that list in like a day. I know it's a lot of old favorites, maybe a couple new ones. Again, I said there are 11 new games on this edition of the list. We covered 5 new ones that hit the list, so there's 6 yet to come in the top 30. Look forward to seeing what those might be. If you've checked out my favorite new to me plays, maybe you already kind of have an idea what some of those are. Maybe you don't. But if you like this video, definitely give me a thumbs up. I already mentioned it, but subscribe below to catch those lists. I bring you a bunch of lists, conversations about board games, reviews, whatever. If you're not a follower, become a follower by subscribing. And let me know below what you think of these 20 games. What surprised you? What do you think's coming up? What games do you hate that are on this list? What games do you love that are on this list and should be higher? I'd love to hear any and all of them. I'm still a small channel, so I can definitely read them and usually try to respond to every comment. So you won't be missed if you comment, that's for sure. I really appreciate you being here, whether it's for the first time or for the almost 200th time, I think, at this point. I'm around 200 videos in the last 3 years, and that's crazy. But either way, I appreciate you being here, and I will catch you next time. Bye. My number 44 is a deck builder that has fallen a few spots from 31 from last year. Did I say deck builder?